Sonic 2 movie novel. It starts out with boringly recapping that now Sonic doesn't have to hide from humans anymore for 2 sentences. It says he made new friends every day. Unless he friended them on social media, I think that's an overly generous interpretation of the word friend, and even then. After a pointless sentence, he plans to do a late night run out of town. It says why not do that? Because he would want to sleep instead. To be fair, someone full of energy and impatient wouldn't want to go to sleep early. I'm a lot like the game Sonic, and it takes me a long time to get to sleep because I can't stop thinking, so it's not impossible that he'd go here at this time. He plans on visiting Seattle because it sounds nice this time of year, but it doesn't explain why. Why is it more nice than every other place? Listening to the police radio's frequencies like Tama taught him was a perfect soundtrack for his run. That's sweet. He's taking an interest in his job. And it makes sense for a character who's all about fighting against someone who's doing something evil legally to be interested in a police radio and end up chasing a stolen armored truck, because both bad guys are doing something evil. When someone asked what Sonic would do after Eggman went talking to a Japanese-speaking YouTube account role-playing as Sonic, he was told Sonic would find other adventures. Obviously, fighting other criminals would have to be what he meant. You'd have to have an irrational blanket hatred for superhero fiction just for being non-Japanese to think Sonic wouldn't do this. His shoes leave a track of flames on the ground, and his quills have a bright blue electric charge. And thankfully, he even got a chili dog to eat from a street vendor. The getaway driver says they're being followed, and after padding, Sonic has to dodge actual bombs. This escalated quickly. I guess that's what it means when it says this is getting ridiculous. Not literally ridiculous. After redundant narration, Sonic pushes the crooks with kicks to the face. He grips the wheel, and all this time, the crooks don't do anything to fight him after the one kick. So it's a good thing that with no kicking experience against humans, he knew how to kick with not enough speed to pulverize someone like he would if he was at Sonic speed, but enough speed to keep them from continuing to attack him. A security guard's tied up among the money bags in the back, and he's muffled by duct tape. After Sonic states the obvious, the story makes him a dork by saying, "Fear not, citizen, I'm the hero you need." It'd be delusional of Sonic to not know he's a hero for fighting bad guys. It'd be out of touch with reality completely. The problem is him talking in a way that's lame and talking too much. He's trying too hard. It makes some sense because it hurt his ego to have to not talk to anyone for a very long time because he didn't get to experience his personality the whole time. So it would result in his cockiness only being an act. Still bad. He doesn't need to say he's the blue dawn that banishes the darkest night. He interrupts himself by saying holy crap. It's realistic and it's respectable that the writer was allowed to have him say that. I never thought it'd be said again. The narration says Sonic was about to hit a little old lady crossing the street with a walker is what he was. It literally says that. The truck screeches as Sonic pulls the wheel hard to the right, and the armored truck somehow tips up on 2 wheels because of it, and he hears police sirens. So the lady gets saved. He talks reassuringly instead of trying to hit the brake with his hand, and the narration says he's almost believing it. So I was right about him not being as confident as he acts. Next Sam, the 2 robbers were knocked out cold. In real life, if you're knocked out too long, you have a concussion and could have permanent brain damage. The bag of bombs slides freely, and Sonic keeps wasting time reassuring for a few sentences. One freshly lit explosive pops loose in the bag, and all of the bombs get lit. In seconds, the bag starts smoking. There's padding with that between redundant narration and then the book recapping what he had to deal with in the last film for no reason interrupting. At least this was mostly a good scene. Sonic gets hit in the face, and after some redundant padding because of that, he turned the entire duffel bag over on the criminal's head, knocking him out again that easily. It didn't need to remind us what the bag contained. As an insane amount of lit bombs fell out, we already know they're lit. He throws them out of the truck and into a dumpster. It could have just said he threw them into a dumpster. because it goes without saying it'd be out of the truck. After redundant padding, the bombs explode, which would require the fixing of the dumpster with money, and Sonic tosses the final bombs out just in time to see them explode in a stinky fireball. Either it smells bad for no reason, or it childishly used stinky as an insult, because Sonic's the focus, which is degrading to Sonic. An explosive takes longer to read than bomb. Sonic says a one-liner pun because he's enjoying himself. And after some annoying padding, he keeps his other hand on the steering wheel as he takes the duct tape off the guard's mouth, so he's told there's one bomb left in his spines. I guess it's believable that he didn't call them spines because he was panicked. Somehow, all that results from this is that his quills are smoking, even though we were told that all of the bombs were lit, so the fire from the lit bomb would have reached his quill, and he'd have been immolated by now. He says sympathetically that he can never find anything in his quills and throws the bomb just in time, which destroys the sewer grate. So after he brags, it's understandable that the guard says he's out of control, but he should have explained why in case you were only focused on the fact that he was being a hero. He wanted to say he's out of control specifically. He is causing collateral damage, but he should be thanking him for not letting the bombs blow up him, which is clearly the only other option, when he has nowhere else to throw them. I'm glad Sonic gets to tell him off, but the way he does it isn't fair. Clearly the only way the guard would have ended up gagged and tied up would be if he was faced with a gun, so it wouldn't matter if he was Security Guard of the Year. He shouldn't not win it because of an unavoidable situation. After padding, it says the stolen bank vault truck started hiding for an ice cream truck surrounded by kids. After a bunch of padding, it finally says Sonic jumped from the trunk and pulled off his wheels so fast that everything felt like slow motion for him, until the truck collapsed onto the street inches from the ice cream truck. How is he able to pull off wheels? I guess Tom showed him how after a tire blew out in front of him. There's unfunny padding where the narration says totally under control, like it was a joke at Sonic's expense, even though he handled this awesomely and did the best that Sonic could do. And the cop cars catch up, and confused cops leave them. After padding that describes what we already know, it's revealed that Sonic was watching from a rooftop perch. He tells them he saved the day, and dorkily calls himself a superhero name. Just because Sonic used to have lame voices and said dorky lines only a few times in the games when he said, because we're Sonic heroes, and the real superpower of teamwork, doesn't mean his entire personality is supposed to be a dork who's only trying too hard to be cool. That fit Tails instead. Tails is fast, so the scene could have been done with him. SDC knows he's fast. Him seeming like a dork is only a rare part of his personality. After redundant padding, it eventually explains that Eggman made a palace out of mushrooms, which lets the eerie red light of that world's sun hit him. It's cathartic that he'd been up all night again. He wastes my time for a while after that. It's new that he put makeshift sunscreen on his head, but it's a waste of time to say egg-like dome of a head. After especially long padding, it reveals that he still has a quill giving him a source of electricity, and that the writer realized he'd resent having to rely on something from Sonic. But this is so boring otherwise. I already assumed he went out to harvest mushrooms. He does so using his egg pod assault vehicle to tear up the landscape. I'm glad it remembers that it's in character for Eggman to like tearing up the environment, but some small amount of joy is understating it. After redundant narration, he finds under the toadstools one that sparkles with a purple glow. After more padding, he calls it colored by xanthium instead of purple for no reason. Somehow he's dumb enough to test out whether a mushroom should be eaten by eating it, instead of putting it in a special machine to analyze it that he would have made first, even though he's been here for months. After one swallow, he sees the world melt away as his stomach feels bad, and he eventually falls to the ground. I'm glad I had the guts to have Eggman trip out on a mushroom. He hears Agent Stone, and after padding, he sees the Stone have lips and talk to him. After padding, everything goes fuzzy, and there's more padding. Because of that acid trip, his brain kicks into overdrive. So eventually he says the star configurations point eventually to the universe's center. So after more padding, he thinks about a celestial star chart and knows exactly where he is. This is taking good advantage of the fact that Eggman's a genius, but still sort of stretches believability into Hollywood genius territory like Malcolm. He's not an astronomer. He doesn't care about beautiful things, so he wouldn't have memorized what the star chart of Earth is supposed to look like to compare it to this one. After a bunch more padding, which includes the lazy humor where him saying bacon out of nowhere is supposed to make you laugh, which makes me wonder if this film as well is going to rely on knee-jerk emotional brainwashing. He figures out a beacon is what he has to build to get home. After he says beacon, he says a bunch of advanced words. If some random alien showed up here with a spaceship, he wouldn't know how to control the spaceship. This has gone ridiculous. It's never been in character for Eggman to bore the audience with overly big words for way too many times. It's in character for him to do so a little bit because he is a genius and arrogant. But the movies do it way too much, which can make his dialogue even more boring. So the story has a bunch of padding until finally the beacon gets fired off. It should have compared it to the beacon Sonic made. And then it goes back to padding. Eggman is so boring. I'm sure people will say I would have liked it if I was hearing Jim Carrey's performance of these lines and seeing him. No, he's a jerk, and the lines are just how I take for granted that Eggman would talk without being exceptionally entertaining to me. And he talks too much. The only interesting line in all of this is that he thanks a mushroom despite acknowledging that it almost killed him, which is just an assumption. It makes him look silly. And it's also cathartic that he starts shouting about the beacon taking a few seconds to work. Something you should have already expected if he's supposed to be a genius. I guess it's because the beacon's made partly of mushrooms. The beacon fires, and it goes back to padding for a while until a golden ring appears and 3 humanoid figures step out wearing weapon-heavy armor. Somehow it was clear that they were scavengers, but it's the narrator saying this because Eggman's napping. At first I don't know who said boo. He pulls a mushroom lever, and the narrator calls him smart for inventing one. If anyone's thinking that because they're mushrooms they're too soft to have inventions made out of them, they're alien mushrooms. After redundant padding, mushrooms collapse around on the so-called would-be scavengers. So that's new. It says one had its legs taken out. If that means his legs were taken off, that's pretty gutsy for Sonic. It probably means its legs were crushed. Either way, it shows how evil and capable Eggman would be. I wish the narration said his and him instead of the dehumanizing it's and it. And from underneath it is redundant. Another took a hit to the face from a stone Eggman pretends is Agent Stone. Directly to the face is redundant. All these redundant words add up. After padding, Eggman's naturally happy enough to dance his way towards the warp ring. The narration doesn't tell me how he danced, but at least that tries to be entertaining for him. But the words still wavering are pointless, and so are the words towards freedom. If only the writer was as good at noticing padding, the book would have been over faster. After padding narration, with the sound of thunder, Knuckles cathartically punches Eggman as he flies through the portal instead of guarding a Master Emerald. In-universe, it's good for Knuckles that he's doing fun stuff. It says he hit him right in the solar plexus. I shouldn't have to look up what that is to know how to visualize properly, because it'd ruin the immersion. I assume he hit him in the chest. Why was Knuckles the last one through the portal? Maybe he got distracted by a butterfly. Eggman flies through the air to land on his back on a mushroom pile. Above him stands Knuckles, who glares suspiciously as he picks up the quill Eggman dropped. He wonders where he got this. The story doesn't bother to actually describe the way Knuckles is shaped as a whole, and instead calls him Creature. Eggman says he got the quill from Sonic, who he calls a menace. He smiles and says he'd be happy to show him the way. The scene was engaging when it was progressing the plot, because the idea of Eggman trying to escape a mushroom world is unique. But usually it was padded out. And I thought it went without saying, but I love that it is a mushroom world, because to take that to Mario. Sadly, it chooses now to go to Tom's boring point of view where he wakes up, which is the most boring time to focus on him. It wastes my time that it calls Tom by his full name and says it's a perfect morning, like anyone would care. I know it's minor that one word is a waste of time, but any problem is still a problem it'd be ideal not to include. And claiming otherwise is the appeal to triviality fallacy. You're only correct when you say something doesn't matter, when what's really meant is you shouldn't get really emotional about it. And I'm not feeling anything about seeing just one or a couple of worthless words. It's also okay to say that when you mean it's evil to even be upset about that at all. For example, about someone getting irritated by how mad he looks. At least the story tells me that Tom likes to drink coffee. Then he notices a ton of singed $100 bills drifting in a breeze along the upstairs hallway. And he gets confused and suspicious of Sonic from bringing the money home. Why didn't Sonic leave the stolen money where it was? In fact, I thought his last scene told me that it wasn't with him, while he was saying he was the Blue Justice. The hedgehog who learned enough from TV about how life works in that country to know Amazon was going to use drones never learned that you're supposed to bring stolen money to a police station. If his plan is to donate all of the money, he would have done so already. Tom looks through a crack in Sonic's door and sees Sonic on the floor hunched over a satchel and a map and one feather of his adoptive mom. The narration says the satchel contained a handful of trans-dimensional rings, even though Sonic used them all up last story. And the entire narration's in past tense as well. I assume the writer knows the rings aren't there. He wrote the last book. He shouldn't have wasted my time reminding me what the satchel had then. Maybe the novelist was wrong about him using up all of the rings in the past book. Tom hears Sonic hopes Longclaw would be proud. He says he's still keeping a low profile, even though the star of the story made it clear that he isn't because he's making a new friend in town every day. So he's lying. It's a relief that Tom got to hear him explain that he had to help them because it's a hero's duty. Because it means that he would definitely understand. Tom calls out to him and asks a stupid question, "You up?" And shows he cares, asking if he got much sleep last night. I like how he's handling this. It's not all about drama by having him angrily interrogate him right away on something he thinks he did. Wind shakes through the room as he opens the door, and he sees Sonic in bed doing an obviously fake yawn. The narration says he hadn't gotten good at lying yet, which was nice. I'd rather the hero of the franchise not be a liar, especially not from being insecure. But if he is going to be one, at least make him competent, because competence is cool. Not to mention, there's more versions of Sonic that are good at lying than ones that do tell lies but are bad at them. Tom says Maddie's making him pancakes to make him feel better. After patting, Sonic gets out of bed and leaves the room. And again he's made lame. He's written like Chip by slowly talking about something edible, which is boring. I can't wait for Tails to get here. The narration states the obvious, and then says whatever was driving Sonic had something to do with Longclaw, which implies that somehow Tom was too stupid to know why Sonic did that, even though he made it obvious. So why say whatever? There's more redundant narration that recaps the obvious. It asks if Tom protecting Sonic earlier made him his father. Why did he not already know that? It says there had to be a way to talk to him other than wagging a finger at him for sneaking out. There is. I hate that it portrays them as clueless about that instead of just admitting that they find his backstory too pitiful to be harsh with him. And why does it say for sneaking out instead of for hoarding stolen money? And even then, why can't he just tell him which charity to donate it to? Every time Tom tried to lecture Sonic, Sonic would distract him, which at least had the good idea of creating a romantic Italian restaurant setting for him and his wife. It says the candles were a nice touch, even though they're mandatory for such a setting. And it says he could have at least brought them some spaghetti, because he's a jerk who wasn't doing this to be nice. After some padding, it says that Tom couldn't let Sonic be a vigilante, and it's frustrating that it doesn't explain why. The logic is he's a cop, but he's a hypocrite. He put Sonic's stolen stuff in a bedroom for him instead of bringing it to the cops, which would be him caring about justice. He's not lawful stupid. He was fine with punching Eggman, even though that's technically against the law. So I wish it explained that he's only against this because he doesn't want Sonic to get hurt or worse. He did almost get blown up, but it'd be selfish of him to prioritize being overprotective of one person so much that he put that over him helping a bunch of people and even saving their lives. He's smart enough to think of one way to get through to Sonic, but too dumb to have thought it up right away. It says that an age-old family form of male bonding in his family is fishing. I wish it didn't say Tom never caught anything with his dad, because it makes me feel bad for them for nothing. I've been told that it's illegal for the average guy to fish for a hobby, without a license and at the right time. So it must be that he has a license and it is fishing season. It explains a vague reason for fishing, and then says the better reason that Sonic will be a captive audience on the boat. He should have known that. It's weird that he went on the fishing trip when that's got nothing to do with running. Though it'd be exaggerating his character to assume he'd never want to do anything for fun besides that. He liked fishing in Sad AM and Archie. To have it make sense that he's here when he already gets a bunch of time to spend with him, I have to assume he actually wanted an excuse to confess. Tom tries to talk to Sonic and finds out he's snoring. Why didn't Tom interrogate him right away so this wouldn't happen? Sonic's head tilts to one side and then the other, so then he was faking being asleep. He falls into the water, and he freaks out, and the story makes fun of him some more, forcing him to say call the Coast Guard when it's not a coast. Tails can't get here fast enough. This feels like a TV episode so far. Tom reaches into the water, and there's redundant narration, and he pulls Sonic back on the boat. It's at least realistic that he gets a face full of water sprayed on his face from that. It's always good that it tries to have comedy with the OCs. It's not taking them too seriously, all the time. Tom reassures him 2 sentences more than he should, and he starts confronting him. And Sonic's patting it out with his feigning ignorance and then trying to guilt him. He's such a brat. Tom lies to him that this wasn't a trap, and says quieter that he and Maddie are worried and want to know why he's doing this. They'd have to be stupid not to know why he's being a hero. Especially when he overheard Sonic blatantly explain why. He saw him bite Eggman and he's seriously confused about why he'd want to do that again. Sonic says he wouldn't understand. If they didn't understand already, he has a point. But he's wasting time for nothing. After patting, Sonic finds him condescending for acting like he's the same way as when he first met him. When he eventually says he can take care of himself, which Tom would have already learned from how he dealt with Eggman. He starts wasting time being a narcissist, and Tom continues to sound condescending to him for no reason, thinking he needs to slow down. Sonic lampshades this. Then don't write it. This is such a blatant conflict ball. I feel insulted that I was expected not to catch this. Tom insists that he's not supposed to be a superhero and doesn't explain why, which should have given him a giant hint that there is no reason against it because he's wrong. Sure, Sonic doesn't wear a superhero costume or have a secret identity, but in every other aspect, he's clearly a superhero. Out of nowhere, Sonic says he's supposed to be his friend instead of his dad. After patting, Tom's wise enough to not show emotion about this, and instead admit he's not his dad, and reassure him that he's cared about and has a family. He flatters him, but says he doesn't have to do this alone. He should have known that. He says sometimes it's impressive just to ask for help. Did he forget how much danger he was put in by him in the last film? Since Sonic doesn't need his help, he says he wants to prove to him he's not still a kid. So after some patting, Tom eventually says he could leave him in charge of the house for a weekend, while he and Maddie go to Hawaii for someone else's wedding. And Sonic's happy about it. I like that he was smart enough to have this be what he said instead of risking his neck watching Sonic be a hero. Which is what you would expect him to say after he said sometimes it's impressive just to ask for help. Smart Sonic characters are rare nowadays. After a lot of padding, some of which repeats the Tails scene from last book, Tails slips Magnaflops over his shoes to press the pedals of a cop car magnetically. That's smart. But here's what's not. He steals a police car for no reason. He could have just kept flying. I mean, it looks stupid now because he has no reason to know that he would need it. Couldn't it achieve the same surprising use that a car would have? By just flying into someone? After redundant narration, at least it says Tails is gonna make it up to Deputy Wave by upgrading the car. That's better than Sonic, who never considered making it up to his theft victims. This guy actually considers that it's wrong. It says he could somehow make the changes on the fly, even though he wouldn't be able to both properly drive and upgrade it. And somehow thinks he needs to find Sonic before it's too late, forgetting how fast he can fly. How is being constrained to driving at a fixed speed on a straight road better than flying at the speed of sound in any direction he wants? And he can run fast enough to keep up with Sonic. How is that better than running? So we could find him without Grand Theft Auto, that he'll get away with without a punishment. Which is a weird thing to do. After pointless narration, Tom and Maddie are about to go through a warp ring to get to Hawaii, and Sonic greets them in the outfit of an airline gate agent. And it's as bad as AOSCH by not explaining how he got that outfit when it's specific to the job, and if he stole one, it'd be too big. Just say he made the outfit. Sonic wastes a few sentences pretending to be an airline agent, which isn't proving his point about being grown up. Maddie says, "Aw, this is so fun," which is her being nice, but the narrative being condescending to him. She pets him, and there's more patting, during which it's revealed out of nowhere that they have a dog, but miss the opportunity for a reference because they don't call him Mutski, not even with one letter off, when the writers knew about way past cool last story. It's mean for Sonic to tell Tom not to pet the dog for no reason. I take Sadie M. Sonic over this guy. This is almost my least favorite Sonic. After patting, Sonic denies a hug and has to get suggested a fist bump instead. Why did they choose now to be like the games? And why was it called a power bump? Forces calls it fist bump. They all do one, and it reassures him that they'll be back, which drives home that he was traumatized by his past because he worries it'll happen again. Archie Sonic did the same thing with his parents, except he was actually human enough to accept the hug. He tosses the ring, and Tom says he'll call him soon, and they warp away. Why doesn't he call him immediately? After redundant narration and Sonic treating us like goldfish by saying it's 48 hours till they're back, he plans to just watch TV. Why else would he mention how many TV channels there are? And Tom must be pretty well off to still have satellite or cable in 2022. Even people twice Tom's age would have cut the cord by then to save money and just use streaming. It explains that Sonic took advantage of being alone in their house by doing a bunch of pointless childlike things that at least he's never done before in the series, but the first two things were infantilizing. He does new stuff like jumping on the couch, rolling in piles of junk food, using makeover mud masks, skateboarding down the stairs, which should have had the board fall out from under him and make him fall down them, but that wasn't described. He would have been hurt the rest of the book of the ad. It says he did stunt jumping over a wedding crystal, putting it at risk just for the added thrills because he's a jerk. The makeover mud mask activity isn't childish though. It still isn't considered cool in the way that Sonic is. After redundant padding, it says he used a riding mower to race through the house, because that's another thing a measly kid would want to do. Sonic just isn't sympathetic in this film. Why am I supposed to respect someone who keeps claiming to be mature and trustworthy, but as soon as Tom leaves the house, he proves Tom was right to think the opposite? There's being flawed, and then there's being awful. And most people have a few awful moments. But the previous film was a lot of them, it's just that most of them were off screen. There's redundant narration, and he retires to a kiddie pool bubble bath with his favorite flamingo floaty. It doesn't need to remind me that a flamingo would be pink, but it's good that he likes the floaty because it's shaped like an animal. It also says he blasted music through the speakers. Why did it waste my time saying they were expensive? If it's to say that he's damaging them from this, what was supposed to be appealing to the audience about Sonic here? What is the point of making him this way with nothing about him that's better when he has a better personality and other continuities that the scriptwriters could have easily researched and used instead? It would be better if he was being a hero instead of doing all of this lame, pointless kid stuff. It'd be productive and cool and charming, because it's clearly a lot closer than this to him being in character. Still, the amount of variety there was in what he did was admirable, because it clearly took effort to come up with all of that stuff. It's respectable to do more effort than you have to as a writer. That's one of the most respectable things about writers. That them having the confidence to use a story idea that you might not think people would like, and then it works. There's some pointless narration, and it says a thunderstorm started, so Sonic goes inside with the narration redundantly explaining why. After redundant padding, there's a blackout. Sonic uncharacteristically cheers about there being a blackout when he wanted to watch a movie. Idiot. It at least acknowledges that Sonic's fun-loving, as he immediately plans on telling ghost stories with a flashlight on and a blanket overhead. The whimpers from the dog make him pity him instead of pointlessly reassuring him. After padding, the TV turns back on, covering the room with gray light and loud static. Sonic's remote doesn't work, and the dog hides. The lights start flickering all around him, and Eggman's voice comes from the TV, and Eggman fills the screen. And the narration says he haunted Sonic's nightmares, because Sonic's more of a wimp in these films. There's redundant narration, and all Eggman says on the TV is that it's a test, but it's about to get real. As if Eggman would ever say it's about to get real. He'd have to be trying way too hard to be cool. And why would he want to impress Sonic? The doorbell rings. Sonic turns his head towards it slowly, uncharacteristically. You'd have to make an active effort to do that, and you won't feel like it when you're nervous. After padding, Sonic has to work up the nerves to open the door. All he opens the door to is Eggman himself. His fear would have been justified if a robot had been at the door that would have damaged the house. He walks into the house with a weak taunt and expects me to know what it means by saying he looked warped and wild. I'm picturing him the same. Sonic insults him as Eggman and threatens him that he made a big mistake coming here. If that was true, he'd try to beat Eggman up right now, starting by punching him in the chest to send him flying. And his super speed would make it impossible for him to fail. There's no reason that he wouldn't have punched him in his solar plexus. Eggman contradicts him in a boring, repetitive way, and at least Sonic says he gets it and rolls his eyes. And the narration lampshades the monologuing does. It'd be better to simply not have him be a chatterbox. Eggman continues boringly taunting him until Sonic finally charges at him, having taken so long to do so that he deserves the punch from Knuckles for being such an idiot. Yeah, the only appeal of this is if you hate Sonic. You'd think Eggman's blatantly evil monologue would have made it obvious to Knuckles by now that he might be the bad guy here. And while that doesn't prove Sonic's the good one, he could have knocked out Eggman and Sonic. It really sucks that they butchered Knuckles' introduction in the game so much that every alternate continuity has to give him a bad first impression and characterize him as a massive idiot. Sonic gets up from the wreckage of the coffee table, and when the room comes back into focus, he notices that Knuckles is in Echidna, and the narration recaps that Echidna's orphaned Sonic again. It shouldn't call Knuckles massive when he doesn't look like Boom Knuckles, when that would have fit him not figuring out Eggman's evil from his gloating, vindictive monologue. If you look at his dialogue, it was pretty obvious that he was evil. This guy was traveling with some scavenger alien, so he doesn't have the excuse that he had no interaction with people his whole life. After some pointless description of Knuckles, there's some padding. Eggman says Knuckles is his best friend forever and makes an acronym of it, which makes him look like a lame dork, along with him tap dancing around the room. This kind of behavior isn't why people liked Eggman. When did he do this earlier? Why does Sonic just go back to talking to Eggman? Why doesn't Knuckles interrupt Sonic with a punch as soon as he starts his boring, predictable discouraging of Eggman? Sonic's fur cracks with energy, and it says he prepared to run straight through Eggman's face. If he ever wanted to do that, he would have already done it. Some people are gonna wonder why he's not being a pacifist here. Obviously, he isn't a pacifist in the games. He killed King Arthur happily. After pointless padding, Knuckles brags that he doesn't need his power as his fist sparks with a red energy, because clearly that was necessary to get the audience to think he was cool. There's pointless narration that the punch was worse this time, and the narration says somehow Sonic couldn't outrun it. So the writing of the scene in the film was so blatantly bad, even the novel writer lampshaded it here, making sure everyone remembers that Sonic's so fast he should have dodged his attack. The story already made its points about Knuckles when he got hit once, so him getting punched through a wall and out of the house wasn't needed. It just makes Sonic forget that he's fast at his expense. The first scene reminded us that Sonic being able to move so fast means he can experience the world in slow motion, so why is Knuckles able to land a second punch? He would have punched Eggman before he got to punch him.